I hope you feel good. Do you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. You won't in a little while. So just hold on to that feeling for as long as you can.
You're good.
No, no.
Oh no. No, you're good.
Good. Okay. We have a challenge, and that is that Putin is waging war in Europe, and an immediate effect is that we're 1,600 terawatt hours short of power that would otherwise be produced with Russian gas. Now that's Putin's fault, but it's also partly our fault.
Try this one more time, sorry.
This is part of the show.
Clearly.
Okay. Are we good? Okay. So that's Putin's fault, but it's also partly our own for relying on fossil fuels provided by a dictator, right? And I think it should inspire us to think differently about how we source the fuels we rely on. Now, the size of that problem is humongous. It's more than 10 times the electricity production of an electricity exporting nation like Norway. It's almost twice the energy consumption or electricity consumption of Germany. So that's the hole in our production system that is appearing at this time. That's going to be difficult to fill. But that's only the first part of the challenge, because there's a challenge that's 10 times bigger. And that is to replace fossil fuels in electricity production globally. That is not a 1,600 terawatt problem. That's a 15,000 terawatt problem. So 15,000 terawatt hours, that is 100 Norways of production. So that's a whole different size of an issue. And if you're not daunted by the task, then there's an even bigger problem, and that's to replace all the energy consumption that comes from other things, from engines that aren't running on electricity, that are fueled by gasoline, fueled by petrol. That's 150,000 terawatt hour problem. Now, the good thing is that we're replacing things that aren't very efficient. So we're not going to have to make all that electricity production. What's at stake is our ability to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, it's not like 1.49 degrees is completely safe and 1.51 is completely unsafe. It's started to get worse, already on the path to 1.5 degrees. There's floods in the Canary Islands. There's droughts in France. There's wildfires in Spain and in France this summer. There's terrible flooding in Pakistan. I could go on and on and on. That's just the last few months. And we're not at 1.5. And these things will get worse as we get closer to 1.5. And they'll get even worse as we go past 1.5 degrees, because we most likely will. If we only, from today, every single thing that we use for solving a task, every single chainsaw that we buy, every single new car that we buy, but are electric, if every single new power plant that comes online runs on clean power, the CO2 committed by the things we already have, the chainsaws that run on diesel, the cars that run on petrol, the fossil fuel plants that still have 5 years to go, the buses that still have 7 years to go, all that stuff will consume so much fossil fuels that we will surpass 1.5 degrees centigrade. So this is already going very fast in a different direction. So how do we How do we make the least of this problem? How do we avoid the worst of this issue? Well, there's a lot of competition about whether solar is better than wind power, or wind power is better than hydropower, or whether there's a place for nuclear power. And it's almost like you had to make a national football team with only one type of player. It's almost like you're doing the Lord of the Rings with only the elves, right? You need to add the hobbits in there and the dwarves and all the other guys. That's how you solve the problem. You need a bit of everything. And so how does that team effort look? Well, at a high level, it's not that difficult. We need to electrify everything. We need to electrify transport. We need to electrify industry. We need to electrify commercial and buildings and our homes. So that all the energy consumption that happens in those domains happens through electric engines, because they're tremendously efficient. And second, because you can make electric energy in ways that don't have such a big impact on the climate. All the electricity needs to be clean. That's not the case, right? So, for example, in Norway today, we are on a 100% or bar one coal plant that we have in Norway, and some gas plants that are running in the oil industry. We're on very close to 100% clean electrical power, but we haven't electrified everything, right? We've only electrified about half of our economy, because there's still cars running on fossil fuels, etc. So you want to have both those numbers on 100, and you're going to do it by adding a heck of a lot of solar energy in utility-sized plants, in commercial and industrial-sized plants, by retrofitting homes the way Otovo does, by putting solar panels on existing roofs and batteries next to those, by building wind power onshore and offshore, by exploiting the hydro dams that exist better, and frankly, probably by allowing nuclear power to operate longer, and then by creating energy efficiencies that allows us to not build more than we absolutely have to, through a digitalization that allows us to have a better utilization of the objects. But it's not that hard. There's a finite amount of things we need to do to solve this. But there's crisis on different levels, right? And the 1,600 terawatt-hour problem that we're facing this winter, there's only a few things that will make it on time. The solar panels that we're putting up in Poland today, they were planned and purchased earlier in September, right? That's a very fast deployment of new energy. It makes you optimistic, right? Solar gets there on time. Wind turbines that get built this year have been planned and commissioned last year or the year before or the year before that, for the most part. And nuclear doesn't make it on time. The nuclear power that's been built in Europe this year was commissioned 17 years ago, right? So for this crisis, addressing the problem with nuclear is like addressing a shortage of soldiers by making babies. It can work in a very long horizon, but it's not working in the immediate term, right? So that's going to maybe solve a 2040 energy crisis, and there's lots of big energy crises coming up. But for this one, we need the fast ones, and the only things that are going to make it on time are solar and wind and energy efficiency. So we need to scale those, and we need to scale them very, very fast, right? But that is possible, to get our foot off the regulatory brake and to get moving on these technologies. And Otovo, we're committed at doing that. We want to lead Europe into a clean and electrified future. And the way we're doing that is by having developed a technology that can assess the potential of solar energy on a roof, avoiding the time spent on doing a site visit, avoiding wasting resources on the people who are not ready to buy yet. They will eventually. They'll just need to get a bit further back in the line so we can help the people who are motivated and ready to get solar panels right now. And to utilize a workforce that is already doing electrical work, carpentry work, and other adjacent things to solar installations, and mobilize that infrastructure to make them put solar panels up on roofs. And we developed this approach, right, where you have an e-commerce approach towards the consumer and a competitive platformed approach towards the installer in Norway between 2016 and 2018. And why here? Well, because it's quite hard, right? The solar resource isn't the best here. The electricity prices aren't the best here. The labor costs aren't certainly not the best here. So if you want to make solar power work for the households here, you need to be very, very digital, very efficient. But we kind of struck gold on that in 2017, 2018, and that allowed us to bring this show on the road. We entered Sweden in 2018, and then France in early 2019, Spain in late 2019, and then Poland a year later, Italy in April 2021, Germany in December of last year, and this year we've sold our first panels in the UK and Portugal and Austria this summer. And now before the end of the year, we'll sell panels in the Netherlands and Belgium and Switzerland also. So that's us scaling a business that we think accelerates consumers' path to going solar. And it is working. This is our ambition for 2025. And if the animation had worked, you can see now how much of it we've filled. It's about half. So this is like, it's so massive that you can build the solar energy close to where people live. And our view is that by the end of the 2030s, a third of the energy will be made and stored the place where it is consumed. And so that's going to be our contribution to scaling the energy transition. Thank you for listening to this introduction. All right, we have time set aside for questions. We don't have a microphone, so the way we'll do this is that once you've thought through whether you have questions, you raise your hand, and then you'll say the question, I'll repeat it so everyone hears, and then I'll do my best at answering. Yes, front row person, yes.
I have a question about geography in terms of scaling. Do you see Otovo as moving towards the US, for instance, or North America, other geographies, and how do you see the challenges as being different, specific to geography outside of Europe?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's geography. So we've made a quite conscious choice to focus on Europe right now. For us, that's a big enough challenge in a way, and it's a challenge that is needed in addressing, or our presence is needed in addressing a real issue for Europe in terms of its energy dependence on outside forces. Now, for the rest of the world, I think you can think of the deployment of solar energy getting friction from different sources, right? The US has lacked the political stability for the residential sector that Europe has built over the last few years, but it has had quite good subsidy situation. So the solar industry in the US is about twice, for the residential sector, is about twice the size of the European one, with half the homes. So if Europe caught up with the US per capita in installations or per household in installations, we would quadruple our numbers. So it shows that Europe is kind of lagging the US. Now, both are lagging their replacement speeds. So the way to think about that is Europe has 250 million households. And my view is, frankly, that all of those will have solar panels on them, right? because the economics are just getting so strong for this. So 250 million households will get solar panels on them. Most of them don't know yet, but that doesn't matter because we're only installing 2 per year, so that we just need 1% of the people to understand this currently to fill the capacity. Now, once you multiply that installation number by 5, you get to 10 million installations per year. That's not incredibly difficult to imagine. That's a bit less than what the European heat pump industry does. So you can do 10 million per year, and then you'll be at the rate that by the time you're done after 25 years, you'll just be replacing the 25-year-old panels that you installed 25 years ago. So at 10 million, you're just replacing. So yes, there's some scaling to do, but it's not super hard to get there. So in a way, if you're looking at a decade forward, Europe and the US will get there. Europe needs to be smarter on financing. The US needs to be less costly because they're twice as expensive as us. And then the rest of the world, there's different stories. In Latin America, it's a lot about the financing. Due to forex risk, emerging markets risk, a Brazilian consumer that can have a solar energy system paid back in 3 or 4 years, still doesn't get financing for that. He's not an attractive counterparty. So for Latin America, there's a financing problem going on, and for much of the rest of the globe, for the global South, it's a problem of trust and security. My brother was working at a business that had operations in Pakistan, and they were relying on diesel-powered generators to generate electricity. And I was like, "Why are you doing that? Solar panels would be so much cheaper in Karachi." He's like, "Yeah, but when they steal the diesel and when they steal the generator, we lose 150 euros. If they steal the solar panels, we will lose 15 times that, 20 times that, right?" So the enforcement of like our property rights here will cost us more than the kerosene, more than the diesel, right? So it's a security problem that goes beyond like what sort of startups usually do. So I think to get to scale there's lots of other problems that I frankly don't have a lot of knowledge about. Yeah. A question at the back there. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. I'm a user experience researcher, and I was really interested to hear that what the challenges were, what you learned.
Right. So a question from a UX researcher on what we've learned from our e-commerce experience selling a renewables product directly to consumers. So what we've learned is that most people say no. Okay. That's the nature of a big ticket item. That's a home improvement where the decision cycle is very long. So compared to other e-commerce that I've been involved in, it's hard to get data on what works. You can A/B test whether putting the buy button on top of the boxer shorts or bottom of the boxer shorts page works when you're selling boxer shorts online, because it's something that's not a big commitment. And if I feel like my drawer is empty, I need to get some new ones, I'll go online and 1.5 minutes later I'll have made the purchase. And you can A/B test this super fast because it's the same cycle of people in the same environment. Here, the decision time for some of the buyers will be a year. And so many things will have changed with the price, the panel yields, the energy situation on the outside that you can't, you're having buyers that came in today and people who really decided a month ago but hadn't come around to do this. So it's very blurry. It's an e-commerce space with lots of noise. And our approach to that is that we need to avoid spending time on the no people. And that's sort of one of the big big rules of e-commerce is do not spend resources on the non-buyers. You need to spend your resources on the maybes and the yes. And so our process is very much about discarding the people who will have a system that they will not buy. So a lot of our focus has been getting the no guys out. Right? We're ordering the queue and we're moving the yes guys into to the front. Now, what characterizes the yeses and the maybes is that they're generally asking 3 types of questions. The first one is about trust. Can I trust you guys? Can I trust your equipment? And that's it's understandable. You're buying a home improvement. It's a handyman product. And that's a key question. Can I trust the guy who's showing up at my house in a van? Can I trust the stuff he's installing on my roof? Like, you don't know a lot of panel brands, and it's not like Volkswagen that you can trust. Like, this is something unknown to you. So solving a trust issue, that this will work. These guys will not ruin your house. This will also work 17 years from now. That's one set of questions, the trust part. Second set of question is on affordability. This is something that people buy with a lot of economics in mind. It's a hedge against future high electricity prices. It's a way to avoid the erratic behavior in your power bill. So you're buying it almost like you're buying a mutual fund or investing in a stock. You're like, what does it cost me? What do I gain from it? So they have a lot of quite detailed economics question. And then the third is this going to be easy for me? Because people like convenience. And at the end of the day, that sort of very often trumps category number 2, because people have lots of stuff in their lives going on. Like, there's a kid who needs to go to the dentist and your garage door is half broken. And like, if this solar panel thing is going to be too much of a hassle, I'm not doing it. So you need to show them that this is going to be easy, it's going to work, and we're just going to take workload off of you. So basically, all our iterations go to addressing one of those 3 topics. Good question there. Yeah.
How will you maintain or manage the steady increase of demand, or how do you fill the supply of both the panels and the batteries? And follow up, how much money, if you don't mind me asking, you raised so far?
Okay, so a question about how we fill the supply, and the second question on the money we've raised. So this supply consists of 2 things. It's a hardware and it's a labor. And the hardware is supplied through global supply chains, and they've been built in the last 20 years. And they're tremendously efficient. They are like the humanity's ability to make more solar panels every year is incredible. And with a bit of luck, how you have the Stone Ages and the Iron Ages. Maybe this will be the solar panel ages, and because they're going to dig up quite a lot of them a million years from now. They're everywhere. To illustrate, if you put the panels that are coming mostly out of Asia, end to end on a conveyor belt to Europe and the US, that conveyor belt would be moving at 120 kilometers per hour, day and night, every single second, right? So that illustrates the speed at which these things are put on the conveyor belt at one end and taken off at the other. And that conveyor belt is probably going to accelerate to 200 kilometers per hour next year. Right? There's so much new capacity coming online now because the increase in demand in the US because of the Inflation Reduction Act, Europe because of its energy crisis and the Repower EU plan, India because of its move to get off reliance on imported fuels, and Chinese re-increase in solar build-outs. That is known to the manufacturers, and there's gigantic plants being built. And the good thing about the panels is that they're built of absolutely super common materials. Silicone, 80% of the Earth's crust is made of that. Glass and aluminium. There's no rare earths. There's a little bit of silver, but there's like these things need to be so cheap that they can't afford to have anything else in them. So like this thing, the panel is just so improved. It's incredible. We started this company 6.5 years ago. Back then, a panel weighed 22 kilos. Now it weighs 17. So that's 5 kilograms that have been removed. And it's not because they wanted to make the panel lighter for the installer, right? It's because constantly, every day, the manufacturers are shaving off. Can we make the aluminum a little thinner? Can we cut the silicone wafers in a different way? So we're spending less on this, right? So this is just the accumulation of micro gains on the quite homogenized product that has brought this thing to market in a cheaper and cheaper and more powerful way. So the improvements in panels and the supply chains related to that are quite incredible in their efficiency. Now, they still have a way to go in certain of the actors in this value chain's respect of human rights, the Chinese. It has a way to go in the carbon footprint. Still, the kilowatt hour made by solar panels in Europe contains 35 to 40 grams of CO2. So that's not zero. It still beats the average CO2 content in the kilowatt hour by 90%. So it's 90% cleaner than your average power, but that's not good enough because we need to get to zero. And so we need to have the panels manufactured in factories that run on solar power, that was manufactured in factories that run on solar power, that was manufactured. That's how you get very close to zero. You can get to 6 grams in that way. So that's the panels. The inverters, much the same story. The batteries, we're starting way behind. They still contain things that are heavy, that are rare, that are expensive, and need to be mined. And so the battery, once we add more batteries to this supply chain, that problem is not solved. But luckily, since we're also in the beginning of the battery age, a lot of research is moving the product. So I'm not sure all of the batteries will be lithium ion. I'm not sure the lithium ion batteries will be the form factor and the density that they have now. And my trust in the ability to improve the hardware is quite strong, just from seeing what happened to windmills and solar panels and inverters over the last 2 decades. So we have a lot of problems, but the supply chain related to the hardware of these devices ranks very low on the problem list. With regards to the labor, this isn't like getting up a nuclear workforce, right? To take Norway as an example, the Norwegian installation workforce is 3 times the size that it was last year. That's not because 100 people, 200 people, 300 people came out of Solar University this year. That started 5 years ago, right? It's because they changed jobs from electricians and carpenters and roofers because they found out that there were more profits in this year. It's a skilled but easily learnable skill set that you can gain if you are in adjacent categories. So I think also for a large part, the labor required to this is very much available. It responds incredibly fast. So the supply side of this, there's bottlenecks, and I think they're half the reason I have gray hair. And we have delays, and we've had all sorts of frictions over the last 2 years. The installers have been sick. The customers have been sick with COVID. We haven't had containers, so the stuff has been delayed getting to Europe. We haven't had inverters because we didn't have the chips inside them. Demand tripled, production only doubled. So there's been a shortage of every single component in this industry this year. But the good thing is this industry just smashes that problem and comes back twice as big the year after, right? And that's going to happen again and again and again, because that's what's been going on since 2000. So high degree of confidence on that. How much have we raised? Guess about 100 million euros. Yeah. Yes.
You did mention that you're not spending time on the nodes, and that
Yeah.
for good measure, right? That's
Yes.
a sensible business model. In the same time, the ones that are maybes and the ones that are yes also were at some point in the node, right?
Yes.
And it took something to get them to a maybe or to a yes, right? In the same time, you also mentioned that the ones that are getting to make this economic decision are taking a lot of future into calculations, right? Some of the areas that are a little bit more sensitive to some of the predictions that are the floods or things that are going to make their houses not livable anymore, it's also a span of 10 to 15 years. How do you sort of balance this out in both the ones that, again, like are no, and you completely, as you said, for now, you're not looking at them, but then also the ones that were, maybe they were a no at some point, right?
Yes, and I think the question is how many of the yeses and the maybes were no's before, and that's true. Now, the philosophy of our model is that compared to taking your van, driving out to a person who's a unknown status, yes, maybe no, we don't know until we show up, to go there or maybe drink a bit of tea, make measurements of the roof, go back and input those data in your Excel sheet, scratch your beard and have a think, and then make a PDF and send it to the customer only to get no. That's an expensive no. We say no or we get to that no in a couple of seconds because you input your address. The customer sees, wow, 45,000 euros here in Shadow Valley where there's no sun. That's the economics of that is going to be just terrible. So he's a clear no, and that's maybe 10 euros spent on Google advertising for us to get to that no. So compared to the traditional model, we're not spending time on no. The software doesn't know whether it's a yes or a no, so we're not trying to actively scare them. It's not like they have to say like, are you skeptical to solar? If like, do you need conviction? Are you sufficiently convinced? It's not like a trial of fire. they can get to the no without any pain. so it's not that. It's just that we don't spend resources to get to the no. And then when they're a no, usually we want to collect their email address and do other things to maybe fish them back and reactivate them at some point, because who knows when there's a rainy day and we might be begging for customers again. Right? They will, right? But we have a belief that they'll self-organize in that, right? Yeah. Good. There was a question in the back there. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is about the circularity of the product, how this gets reused or recycled at the end of the life cycle. Now, the panels that go into Europe are mandated to be part of a recycling system by which you pay into a fund upfront, and then that fund sort of gains value and then is funded to take over this equipment when it gets out of its life cycle. So it's a bit like when you have bottles in Norway, you pay upfront, and then that's part of a recycling effort into this. So that's how that works. And I think for a large part, the aluminium will be recycled. You can strip just the aluminium that goes around the panel straight off. For the glass and silicone to be reused, I don't see that as an easy process. They're glued together. There are some startups that are experimenting on this. It's a valuable problem to solve, but it's not an easy one. So we'll see what happens to that. The good thing about it is that it's a thing that's not harmful. It's glass and silicone. It's not very harmful. For the batteries, it's a great story of reuse, because a lot of the batteries are either manufactured on the same plants and are kind of sub car grade batteries that have lower density, so they're already kind of an efficiency measure in another value chain. And that type of thinking will 100% sure be valid when the batteries are not efficient enough to function properly in a home setting, where they're depleted to maybe half, where the response time is half. Then the spatial use and the the usefulness of that battery is maybe too low for a home, but inside that battery there will be components that are valuable in other settings, in an industrial setting that is less space constrained and weight constrained than a car in a home. So I think the reuse on batteries, we're just getting started. The first Nissan Leafs batteries are now turning into home batteries as they're getting too old to work in cars. And so I think that's going to be a tremendous story of lots of that chemistry and lots of those components being reused. And then reuse is a lot better than recycle, and recycle is better than throw away. But I think for the batteries it's going to be reuse and recycle. For the panels it's going to be a bit of recycle and some throw away. Yeah. I got another question at the back there.
Yeah, so I've got an experience because I've actually my mom is getting panels from Otovo.
Yeah.
She of course was comparing to a local supplier. One thing that was very easy was that you guys were the price that she got straight away a good price, where she would have to go back to the more local and sort of haggle to get something similar. In the end, she felt more like, okay, a local supplier, someone I can trust, because I don't know who these guys in Oslo are. So one of the things I was wondering though is that she did this very consciously because she wanted to be a pioneer in her neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so what I observe is that she's a huge resource for you, but I don't think she has a relationship to Otovo on a daily basis. I understand completely why, because you have so many things that you're solving. You're hammering down these black holes, like crazy. But it feels like me, you have a huge resource to tap into to create a more lasting relationship. Because you're running an e-commerce business with one-off customers. Okay, good, we're done. Next, in 25 years you might see her again. But it feels like it's a huge opportunity to tap into.
Yeah. Did you hear that? Yeah. Okay. I agree, right? And we're growing crazy fast now, and of course, a lot of opportunities falling by the wayside. I'm ashamed that the opportunity that we're not exploiting in our installer relationships. We talked today about getting some Patagonia vests out to the best installers, just with the Otovo logos on them, and say like, you're a top installer. Thanks for helping us out. Like we need to do more of those type of things. We need to also appreciate our customers, and that's where we came from back in 2016 and 2017 when we were developing the product. We did garden parties at the customers' houses. We showed up at community centers, and we hand sold at least 150 first projects, and then built the code to make this more automated later on. So we were definitely driven by these pioneers, and like that was part also of defining the problem that we knew that the software had to solve, right? Because we wanted to sell to pioneer mom and not to engineer dad, because he's a waste of time. He's he's going to waste our time with lots of detailed questions. So yes, we're conscious of the problem, and it's an opportunity. It is, yeah. Good. Okay, lots of questions. I'll take them in that direction. Okay, bearded man first. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any maintenance required?
Yeah.
How is the performance?
Yeah. Okay, a question about the performance. I have two more questions. Yes. Okay. Short story is there's no degradation that isn't known of at the beginning. The panelists start at guarantee for 100. The panel manufacturers guaranteed us for 103, and that's completely known technology. Degradation, there's almost no deviation. There's no need to replace the panels. They're like completely predictable. The inverter, it lasts half the life of the rest of the system. So at the halfway point, you need to change inverter, and then you keep going. That's the short story. One more question over here, bearded man number 2. Yes. Wow, big question. Okay, what are our main digitalization challenges? I what can I say about that? I don't know. You know what? We like governments that make their cadastre and building data available to the public. Then we can build applications that are more accurate than we get when we're asking the questions to the consumer or having our software look at aerial photography and guess shapes, because often the government knows the size of buildings and the tilts of roofs and stuff. And in Norway, the government is kind and supplying that to the consumers. In some cities, the city municipalities allow us to have lighter data, but more in general, governments should be sharing of data they collected for some use and have their citizens and their companies use them for other reasons. I'd say that's probably a big opportunity. Good. Okay, thank you for listening. We have more stuff on the program. The panelists are almost falling asleep. Yeah. Yes, thanks.